In the silent dawn light, Robert Hayes sat alone in the vast living room of his penthouse. He gazed out through floor-to ceiling windows at the city below, a sea of lights now fading as morning broke. Skyscrapers stood tall like silent sentinels, but they offered him no comfort. The weight of his illness pressed on him more heavily than any fortune he had amassed over decades. His shoulders ached from fatigue and worry. Each breath felt like a reminder that time was slipping away. Robert's home was a palace of wealth. Marble floors gleamed under his custom lighting. Expensive paintings lined the walls. Rare sculptures rested on pedestals, their smooth curves and vivid colors speaking of artists he had collected from around the world. Luxury furniture invited him to relax, yet he felt no peace. The emptiness of each room reminded him of the emptiness in his heart. He remembered nights when these halls had echoed with laughter and music during lavish parties. Now those voices existed only in memories. Stored on his tablet, he reached for the slender device beside him and opened his photo albums. A gallery of faces smiled back, his parents on their wedding day beaming, his younger sister at her high school graduation proud and radiant, his late wife in a white dress, her eyes shining with love. He tapped carefully to view each image. His finger trembled when he reached the picture of his daughter, Emily, on her 10th birthday. Her wide grin and sparkling eyes reminded him of all that he had once held dear. He closed the album. Tears welling up despite his best efforts to stay composed, his doctor had told him there was nothing more to be done. The illness had spread too far. Chemotherapy and surgery had cost millions, but they had not offered him a cure. Each treatment left him weaker. His body had begun to betray him. Robert, who once traveled private jets and yachts, now struggled to walk from his bedroom to the living room. He leaned back against the plush couch, remembering how he had built his empire through hard work and sharp decisions. He had never feared risk until now. He looked at his watch. It was early, only 6:30. In the days before his diagnosis, he would have been attending board meetings and handling business calls by now. Instead, his assistant brought a tray of pills and a glass of water. Robert swallowed the small capsules, each one a reminder of his fading strength. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic below. A single pigeon cooed outside on the balcony railing. He rose slowly and walked to the window. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to stand tall. The view stretched out before him, the city's skyscrapers, the winding river that glinted. Under the rising sun, parks dotted with morning joggers, and streets that would soon fill with the busy rush of people on their way to work. He imagined them all living normal lives, unaware of his struggle. To them, he was just another rich man, a face on a business magazine cover. They did not know that he felt more alone than ever. Robert sighed and turned away. He walked to a small desk in the corner of the room. On it lay letters in neat piles, unread. Some were invitations to charity galas and fundraisers. Others were requests for donations from causes he no longer felt a part of. He picked up the top envelope, addressed in elegant script. It was an invitation to speak at a gala for children's education. He bit his lip. He had donated millions to that cause over the years, but he had never met any of the children who benefited. Now, when he thought of children, his heart felt both heavy and hopeful. He set the invitation down and opened another letter. This one came from a man in a small village halfway around the world, thanking Robert for a grant that had built a school. The letter described a classroom filled with eager faces and dusty floors, where children asked questions with shining eyes. Robert's chest tightened. He had written the check, but he had never seen the results. He wondered what it would feel like to stand in that classroom and see those children looking up at him, hopeful and grateful. He looked back at the piles of mail, at the invitations and articles and reminders of a life built around money. He wondered if any of it would matter after he was gone. He felt a deep longing for something real, something lasting. The thought of dying alone in this magnificent penthouse made him shiver. He had worked so hard to build his legacy, to leave behind a name that would be remembered, yet now he feared he would leave nothing but empty rooms and plates that no one would ever taste. He sank into the couch again. His body ached, and his spirit felt even more weary. He closed his eyes and let his mind wander to simpler times. He thought of childhood summers spent playing by the river near his home. He remembered the laughter of friends and the warmth of family gatherings. Those days seemed so far away now. In this golden cage of wealth, he felt trapped by his own success and haunted by the faces he had lost. A knock at the door startled him. His assistant peeked in. "Sir, the nurse is here with your daily check," she said softly. He nodded, wiping his eyes. When the nurse arrived, she examined him. With gentle care, she spoke in quiet tones, asking how he felt and adjusting his medications. Robert appreciated her kindness. She treated him as a person, not as a number or a source of funding. When she left, he felt a small spark of warmth. He realized that kindness, more than any amount of money, brought comfort to his weary heart. After she departed, he stood again and walked toward the balcony. The glass doors opened easily, and a cool breeze greeted him. Inhaled deeply, tasting the crisp air. He placed his hands on the railing and looked down. Below, a few early workers cleaned the streets. A newspaper vendor arranged the morning edition on a stand. The city was stirring to life, moving forward without him. He thought of that small village school and the children who might already be at their desks, waiting for lessons. He thought of his daughter, grown now and busy with her own life. He thought of all the faces from his past. A tear rolled down his cheek. He wiped it away, then straightened his back. He realized that even if he could not build another business or sign another deal, he still had time for one more thing. I had time to reach out, to connect, to leave something more than money behind. He closed his eyes and whispered a promise to himself. He would not die alone. He would find a way to touch one life, to make a difference that felt real and lasting. He turned away from the window and walked back inside. The rooms were still grand and empty, but in his mind he imagined them filled with laughter and hope. He imagined a child's smile lighting up the space. He pictured himself not as a lonely old man, but as someone who cared and who was cared for in return. His steps felt steadier. A small warmth glowed in his chest. Weeks, he felt purpose. Robert sat down at the desk again, and this time he picked up a blank sheet of paper. His handwriting was neat, practiced from years of signing official documents. He wrote slowly, each word carrying weight. He wrote a note to his assistant, "Please find a way to help one child who is hungry today." He asked for names of families in need from local shelters and food kitchens. He asked to meet the child personally, to learn her story. He felt a gentle excitement stir within him, as if a door had opened in his heart. When he finished the note, he folded it and placed it on top of the invitation pile. He looked around at the emptiness of the room, but now it did not feel so lonely. He had found a way to fill it with hope. He rose to his feet, his illness still heavy on him, but his spirit lifted by the thought of reaching out. He gathered his strength and called his assistant. As she entered, he spoke with a new determination in his voice. She looked surprised but listened closely, in the quiet penthouse. The man who had once measured life by profit margins now measured it by the beat of his own heart. His wealth had given him many comforts, but only one thing truly mattered now: being part of someone else's life. He looked at the city skyline once more, but this time he saw not loneliness, but possibility. And in that moment, Robert Hayes took the first step toward filling his empty halls with something more precious than gold. He woke early the next morning, before the sun rose, and waited in the living room. His assistant, Maria, arrived with a folder of notes. Inside were names and addresses of local families who needed help. Robert studied each page carefully. His body felt weak, but his mind burned with purpose. He tapped the address of one family in a poor neighborhood not far from his building. He asked Maria to drive him there in a simple car instead of the usual limousine. He wanted to feel closer to people's real lives. The car moved through quiet streets. Streetlights still glowed as they passed shuttered shops and low brick houses. Robert watched from the back seat, his heart pounding. He noticed broken fences, cracked sidewalks, and empty lots where children once played.
Out.
Soon they reached a small row of homes, some with peeling paint and overgrown yards. Maria stopped the car in front of an old building that held 2 small apartments. She handed Robert the folder and nodded. Robert opened the gate slowly. It creaked, and he winced. He climbed the few steps to the front door and knocked gently. A woman answered. She looked tired. Her face was drawn, and her clothes looked worn. Robert recognized her from the file as Mrs. Kahn. He smiled kindly. He introduced himself and said he had come to help with food. Mrs. Kahn stepped aside and motioned him in. The apartment was cramped. A small table stood in the corner. One chair leaned against the wall. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting pale yellow light across the room. He followed Mrs. Kahn into the living area. She led him to a shelf with a stack of empty plates. He asked where her daughter was. She pointed to a narrow hallway. At the end, a small bedroom door stood open. Robert walked toward it, each step echoing in the quiet flat. Through the door, he saw a little girl sitting on the edge of a thin mattress on the floor. Her hair was tied back in a neat ponytail. She wore a faded dress that once may have been pretty, but now looked dull and worn. Her feet were bare, and she held her knees close to her chest. Robert knelt down in front of her. Her eyes were wide and cautious. He placed a small bag of groceries on the floor: rice, lentils, bread, and a few packets of milk powder.
You're watched.
Him, silent. He smiled and said, "Hello, I'm Robert. I brought these for you." She said nothing. He gently picked up a loaf of bread and broke it in half. He offered a piece to her. She stared, then took it slowly. She bit into it and chewed. Quietly, Robert sat back on his heels. He realized how long it had been since he had offered something simply for kindness. Maria and Mrs. Kahn watched respectfully from the doorway. The girl munched the bread, chewing with care. After a moment, she lowered the rest of the bread onto a small plate and looked at Robert. Her expression was neither sad nor joyful. It was neutral, as if she had learned long ago to hide her feelings. He spoke softly. "Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow?" She tilted her head slightly, puzzled. He explained that he wanted to talk more and learn her name. She said quietly, "Sarah." Robert smiled. "Sarah, would you like to eat with me?" She hesitated, then nodded once. He stood up and patted his suit. "Then I will see you tomorrow." At 6, he promised to pick her up and take her somewhere nicer than here. Maria delivered him back to the penthouse. Robert walked in with the grocery bag. He placed it on the desk, but his thoughts were already on Sarah. He knew that tomorrow he would face more than just meeting a child. He would face his own fears of belonging and connection. All morning he thought about her small frame and the way she held her food. He remembered how kind the nurse had been the day before. He wondered if kindness could truly change a person's life. At noon, he paused a business call and asked his chef to prepare a simple meal: soup and soft bread. A meal any child would enjoy. He insisted that Maria arrange a chauffeur and a plain car to avoid scaring Sarah. When evening came, he dressed in a simple sweater and trousers. He chose shoes without shine. He did not want to intimidate her. At precisely 6, the car pulled up to Sarah's building. He waited outside while Maria went to the door. When the door opened, Sarah appeared holding her mother's hand. They both wore thin jackets against the cool air. Sarah's mother looked at Robert uncertainly, then at her daughter. Sarah stepped forward, her head lowered. Robert knelt again beside her. "Hello, Sarah. Are you ready?" She looked up with shy eyes. He smiled gently. "Don't worry. You're just going to have some soup." She nodded. He took her hand. It was small and cold. He led her to the car. Inside, he sat beside her rather. Then in front, he offered her a warm blanket. She wrapped it around her shoulders and said nothing. The drive was short. Sarah stared out the window as city lights passed by. She pointed at a big fountain glowing in the night. Robert pointed back at the tall office tower where his penthouse was. She blinked and said softly, "Your home is very tall." He nodded. "Yes, it is. But tonight, we are going somewhere small and cozy." Sarah looked puzzled but stayed quiet. They arrived at a small cafe tucked between two buildings. The sign above the door glowed with warm yellow light. Inside, a few tables sat empty. The chef greeted them by name. He had prepared a bowl of soft vegetable soup and warm bread on a plate. The smell made Sarah's eyes widen. Robert led her to a table by the window, pulled out her chair, and helped her sit. He sat opposite her. He waited for her to begin. She raised the spoon and tasted the soup. She closed her eyes and smiled at its warmth. Robert smiled too, feeling a spark of happiness. He asked her simple questions. "What is your favorite color? What games do you like?" She answered softly, saying she liked blue and playing hopscotch with her friends. She talked more as she ate. Robert listened with full attention, nodding and asking gentle follow-up questions. After the soup, he offered her a small piece of cake. She took it carefully and said, "Thank you." He realized that Sarah had manners he had never practiced himself. He had wealth but lacked simple grace, felt both admiration and humility. As they finished their meal, he asked her about school. She said she did not go to school every day because her mother could not always pay for supplies. He felt a pang. In his chest, he decided then and there to change this. He told her that he wanted to help her go to school, to buy her books and a uniform. She looked at him with surprise. "You will?" he asked. She nodded and said that would be nice. He reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "It will be nice," he said softly. They left the cafe together. The night air felt crisp, but Sarah no longer seemed cold. She looked up at Robert and asked quietly, "Why are you helping me?" He paused, searching for an answer. He said, "Because I have much and you have little, and because you deserve kindness and I deserve to give it." She nodded slowly, as if understanding more than her years suggested. At her building, he knelt down one more time, said, "I will see you again soon, Sarah. We have much to do." She looked at him and whispered, "Thank you, Robert." He stood and watched as she and her mother walked inside. The door closed behind them. He felt a quiet joy and a new sense of purpose. Back at the penthouse, he walked to the balcony and looked at the city lights. He remembered the lonely man he had been the day before, how he felt connected to a world beyond money and walls. He felt the spark of hope. He vowed silently to make tomorrow even better for Sarah and her mother. He would bring school supplies and warm clothes. He would show her that someone cared. He climbed into bed that night with a lighter heart. His illness did not disappear, but his loneliness did. He closed his eyes, his last thought, the image of Sarah's small smile. He slept deeply, dreaming of a simple day tomorrow when a little girl would learn to read from a tablet he would give. Her and he would learn how precious small acts of kindness could be. Robert woke early with a quiet excitement that settled in his chest like a warm glow. He dressed in simple clothes, once more a soft sweater and dark trousers, and left the penthouse feeling lighter than he had in months. Today he would bring Sarah the school supplies he had promised. He felt a mix of eagerness and nervousness, as though he were a child on the first day of school himself. Maria arrived with a large tote bag filled with notebooks, pencils, erasers, and a crisp new uniform, folded neatly. Robert glanced at the contents and smiled. Each item seemed ordinary to him, but he knew it would mean the world to Sarah. He tucked a small tablet into the bag as well, loaded with simple reading apps and games that could help her learn. He imagined her surprise when she saw it. The drive to Sarah's neighborhood felt different this morning. The streets still bore signs of hardship, broken sidewalks, overfilled dumpsters, but they also brimmed with life. Children rode bicycles to school, mothers chatted on doorsteps, and shopkeepers swept in front of their stores. Robert saw more than the buildings. He saw faces full of hope and struggle. He thought of how easy it was to overlook these lives when caught up in board meetings and stock reports. When they arrived, Maria helped Robert carry the tote to the front door. Mrs. Khan answered, her tired eyes softening when she realized what Robert had brought. Sarah appeared behind her mother, curiosity flickering in her dark eyes. Robert knelt again and smiled. "Good morning, Sarah," he said gently. "I have something for you." Sarah stepped forward slowly. Robert lifted the bag and set it on the floor. "These are for you," he said. school supplies, your new uniform, and a tablet. He watched as Sarah reached for the uniform, her small fingers brushing the crisp fabric. "Said for me?" Her voice was soft, almost disbelieving. Robert nodded. "Yes, for you. You deserve to go to school every day." Sarah's mother placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder and shook her head. "It's Robert. You are too kind," she whispered. Robert shook his head. "No, this is my promise." He stood and offered his hand to Sarah. "Would you like to try on your uniform now?" Sarah hesitated, then took his hand. He led her to a small mirror hanging on the living room wall. Uniform was navy blue with neat pleats and a crisp collar. Sarah slipped out of her old dress and stepped into the uniform. It hung a little loosely, but Maria assured her they could adjust it if needed. Sarah looked at her reflection and touched the fabric. A shy smile bloomed on her face. "Gosh, Robert." Felt his eyes sting with emotion. Said, "You look wonderful." Sarah turned toward him and whispered, "Thank you." Robert knelt to meet her gaze. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will take you to school myself, if that is okay." Sarah nodded before her mother could answer for her. "I would like that," she said. Later that afternoon, Robert and Maria returned to the penthouse. Robert sat at his desk, studying his calendar. He thought about how to make tomorrow special. He asked his chef to prepare a simple lunch to take with them sandwiches. In fruit and he packed a thermos of warm milk. He placed everything, along with a small bouquet of daisies he had picked up on the way home, into a tote bag. He touched the daisies, thinking of Sarah's face when she saw them. The next morning, the city hummed with activity. Robert and Maria met Sarah and her mother at the apartment building. Sarah wore her new uniform and carried the tablet gingerly in a protective case. Robert handed her the bouquet. Her eyes widened as she sniffed the flowers, then she tucked them gently into her school bag. He felt his heart swell. They walked to the car and Robert held the door open for Sarah. He slid into the back seat beside her and offered her a sandwich. She accepted with a smile, her uniform clean and neat. As they drove, Sarah tapped the tablet screen, opening a reading app with colorful pictures. She tapped again, and a friendly voice read a short story aloud. Robert watched her face light up with wonder. The school gate, children milled about, some waving goodbye to parents, others chasing each other in play. A stern school guard greeted them. Maria introduced Robert and Sarah's mother, explaining that Sarah would be a new student starting today. The guard nodded and opened the gate. Sarah squeezed Robert's hand, smiled and said, "I will wait. Here for you at the end of the day." Sarah climbed the steps and stepped into the bustling courtyard. She paused and turned to wave at Robert. He waved back, feeling a lump in his throat. He watched as she disappeared into a classroom door, her small figure swallowed by the crowd. Robert and Maria left, and he felt a sudden emptiness. He had thought the morning would feel complete once Sarah was inside, but now he missed her already, decided to use the time wisely. He returned to his penthouse and wrote notes to the school's principal, offering to help fund lunch programs and after-school tutoring for Sarah and any other child in need. He called his foundation's director and asked for immediate action to support that school and others in the neighborhood. By midday, Robert felt productive. He spent hours on the phone, drafting proposals and scheduling site visits. He talked to 2 local food pantry coordinators, promising to expand their services. He drafted plans for a scholarship fund that could pay for school uniforms, books, and transportation. He felt alive, driven by purpose rather than profit. Meanwhile, Maria called with news. The school's principal was grateful and eager to meet Robert. They arranged for a meeting that afternoon. Robert dressed in his simple sweater again. He wanted people to know he was not there as a distant billionaire, but as someone who truly cared. He arrived at the school and followed Principal Ahmed through busy hallways. They entered a small office lined with posters and children's artwork. Principal Ahmed offered tea, and Robert accepted gratefully. As they talked, Ahmed described the challenges the school faced: overcrowded classrooms, limited supplies, children arriving hungry and distracted. He spoke of teachers who did their best but needed more resources. Robert listened intently, taking notes. He asked questions about long-term goals and immediate needs. When the meeting ended, Principal Ahmed escorted Robert and Maria to a playground where Sarah and her classmates played. Sarah spotted Robert and ran toward him, skidding to a halt in front of him. "Mr. Robert?" she shouted. Her classmates turned to stare. Some waved, others whispered. Robert knelt, and Sarah threw her arms around him. He hugged her gently, careful not to crush her small frame. "Did you have a good morning?" he asked. He nodded enthusiastically. "I love school," she said. "I learned to write a new word today." She pointed to her tablet and showed him the screen. The word family typed neatly in bright letters. Robert's throat tightened. He said, "Family is a good word." Sarah beamed. Robert stood and looked around the playground, imagined what this space could become. A safe haven for learning, a place of laughter instead of loneliness. He turned to Principal Ahmed and said, "Let's work together to make this school a place where every child can learn and grow without fear." Ahmed's eyes shone with gratitude. That evening, Robert returned home. He slipped off his shoes and wandered through the penthouse, now a place filled with the promise of change. He thought of Sarah's smile, her small hand in his, the way she laughed when she saw her uniform. He realized that in helping her, he was healing parts of himself he had long thought beyond repair. Sat by the window, watching the sunset cast golden light over the city. The skyline looked softer, as if it too had been touched by kindness. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow we begin again." He closed his eyes and drifted into sleep, his dreams filled with children's laughter and the hopeful hum of a classroom. Alive with learning. In that night, Robert Hayes felt a peace he had never known in all his years of wealth, a peace born not of money, but of human connection and the simple power of giving. Robert woke with the dawn again, but this morning, he felt a different kind of excitement. Today, he would visit Sarah at her home after school and invite her to the penthouse. He dressed carefully in a soft sweater and dark pants, choosing clothes that felt friendly rather than formal. He packed a small box of art supplies, crayons, colored pencils, sketchbooks, and tucked a handwritten note into the lid. In neat letters he had written, "For Sarah, from Robert." When the car arrived, Maria carried the box and Robert followed with a warm smile. They drove through streets that felt familiar now, passing shops where owners greeted Robert by name. At Sarah's building, Mrs. Khan and Sarah waited at the gate. Sarah held her tablet tightly in one hand and the bouquet of daisies in the other. She looked up and waved shyly. Robert knelt and offered his hand. "Good afternoon, Sarah," he said softly. "Would you like to come with me today?" Sarah glanced at her mother, then nodded. Mrs. Khan smiled gratefully and stepped aside. Robert and Maria lifted Sarah into the car gently, tucking the art box at her feet. As they rode through the city, Sarah opened the note and read it aloud in a small voice. "For Sarah." From Robert, she looked up at him, eyes shining. Robert smiled back. "I hope you like drawing," he said. "I thought you might want to color some pictures with me." They arrived at the penthouse just as the sun slipped behind the skyscrapers. Robert led Sarah through the grand entrance, but tonight the penthouse did not feel empty. He had asked his chef to prepare a simple dinner: grilled chicken, steamed, vegetables, and mashed potatoes served on bright, colorful plates. A soft rug covered the marble floor, and a small table stood in the center of the room for their art session later. Sarah's eyes grew wide as she looked around. "Oh," she whispered. "It's so big." Robert gently put a hand on her shoulder. "It is big," he agreed, "but I want you to feel at home." He showed her the living room first, pointing out a small bookshelf he had filled with children's books. Picked up one book about a brave rabbit who helped friends in need and handed it to her. "You can read this whenever you like," he said. Sarah ran her finger along the book's cover, then looked up. "Thank you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Robert smiled. "After dinner we will draw pictures, and I have a surprise for you." Sarah's eyes lit up with curiosity. They walked to the dining area. Sarah helped Robert carry her plate and glass to the table. He pulled out her chair and she sat down carefully. They ate together in friendly silence, the soft clink of cutlery the only sound. When they finished, Robert cleared the plates and opened the art box. He laid out crayons, pencils, and sketchbooks on the small table. Sarah picked a blue crayon first and held it awkwardly. Robert demonstrated a smooth circle on his page. Sarah watched and then tried herself, her tongue peeking out in concentration. Soon, she sketched the outline of a house with a little stick figure inside. Robert drew beside her a picture of two people holding hands under a sun. They laughed when his son ended up smiling with big eyes. After a while, Robert asked, "Would you like to see something else?" Sarah nodded. He led her to a door she had not noticed before. Inside was a small room set up for painting easels, brushes, pots of water, and tubes of paint. Sarah gasped. "Wow," she said. She picked up a brush and dipped it into bright red paint, making a bold stroke across the canvas. Robert smiled and mixed colors on his own palette. They painted side by side, the quiet friendship growing between them. Sarah painted a tree with green leaves and tiny red apples. Robert painted a large heart beside her tree. Sarah looked at his heart and blushed. "That is nice," she said. Robert nodded. "It is for you," he replied. When the paint dried, Robert said, "I have one more thing for you." He opened a small wooden box and took out a framed photograph. In it, Sarah stood in the school courtyard, smiling and holding her tablet. Behind her were classmates playing. On the back, Robert had written, "Brave and kind, June 2025. Sarah looked at the photo and gasped softly. "Is that me?" she asked. Robert nodded. "It is you," he said. "I wanted you to have a memory of your first day at school." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of surprise and joy. She hugged the frame and said, "Thank you." Robert felt his own eyes sting. He knelt to be at her level. "Sarah, I have something important to ask you." Sarah looked puzzled. Robert took a deep breath. "You see, I do not have children of my own," he began, his voice gentle. "I have been alone for a long time, but being with you has brought me so much happiness. Sarah, will you accept me as your father?" The room fell silent. Sarah's brush hovered over her canvas. She set it down and looked at Robert, her small face serious. She thought for a long moment, her dark eyes steady. Then she shook her head. Robert's heart sank. Had he been too bold? He swallowed hard, preparing to apologize. Instead, Sarah spoke. "I do not need a father to feel loved," she said in her clear, small voice. Robert blinked. "But," Sarah continued, "there are many other children who feel hungry and alone, and you said you would help them." She looked up at Robert, her gaze steady and wise beyond her years. "Promise me that no child in this city will go without a meal after you are gone. Promise me you will help them." Robert felt a wave of relief and pride wash over him. Had hoped for more, but her request held deeper meaning. He knelt and took her small hands in his. "I promise, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will use everything I have to make sure no child goes hungry." Sarah smiled then, a bright and shining grin that lit up the room. She squeezed his hands and whispered, "Thank you, Robert." They sat together in silence, painting and talking softly about their dreams. Robert realized that Sarah's wisdom and courage had given him a new path. He did not need her to call him father to feel loved. He needed only to fulfill her promise. As the evening light faded and the city lights below began to glow, Robert knew his life had changed forever. He had found a daughter in purpose and kindness, and through Sarah's eyes, he saw that love could grow in the simplest of promises. Robert woke before dawn again, though he did not feel tired. His mind was alive with plans. Tonight, he would host a special dinner for the people who ran the food kitchens and the teachers who had helped Sarah. He dressed in clothes made by a small local tailor, simple shirt and trousers, so he would blend in with his guests. He wanted them to feel at home, not overwhelmed by his wealth. In the penthouse kitchen, the chef and Maria bustled about, preparing dishes from around the world: warm vegetable stew with fresh herbs, rice pilaf dotted with colorful vegetables, and whole roasted chicken with a light sauce. They laid out bread baskets and bowls of fruit. On a side table, they set up juice and water. Robert walked among them, checking on each dish, tasting a spoonful here and there. He smiled when he tasted the stew. "This is perfect," he said quietly. "Thank you." By early evening, the guests arrived one by one. Mr. Ahmed. The school principal came first, carrying a stack of papers plans for new classrooms and lunch schedules. He greeted Robert with a warm handshake. "Thank you for inviting me," he said. Robert waved him inside. "Please, come in and make yourself comfortable. Is your evening as much as mine?" Next to arrive was the head of the local food pantry, Ms. Malik. She carried a ledger filled with names of families. She looked around the grand room in surprise. "This is a beautiful place," she said. Robert smiled. "But tonight it is a place for good work. Please, sit." She took a seat near Mr. Ahmed and began to whisper excitedly about plans to feed more children. Robert listened closely, nodding. Soon teachers from Sarah's class appeared. They wore simple clothes and carried notebooks. They greeted Robert with shy smiles. One teacher, Ms. Patel, brought a drawing Sarah had made of the penthouse. "She drew it just yesterday," Ms. Patel said. Robert knelt and looked at the picture. Tall windows, a balcony with flowers, and two stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. He felt his heart swell. More guests arrive, volunteers from a nearby women's shelter, managers of community centers, and a doctor who ran a children's health clinic. Maria served each person a bowl of stew and bread. Robert walked from table to table, talking with each guest. He asked about their work, their needs, and their hopes. He made notes on a pad, promising support where he could. After everyone sat down, Robert stood at the head of the long dining table. The soft glow of lamps cast a warm light over the group. He cleared his throat gently. The room grew quiet. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I have been blessed to meet many of you through my work with Sarah. She taught me the true meaning of giving. Tonight I want to announce the founding of Sarah's Table." He paused as a ripple of surprise passed through the room. "Sarah's Table will provide daily meals for children and families in need across the city," Robert continued. "It will fund school lunches, community kitchens, and mobile food vans that reach remote neighborhoods. It will also support after-school programs and health checkups for children." He looked at each face and said, "Because every child deserves to eat and to learn without hunger." The room erupted in applause. Mr. Ahmed stood and raised his glass of juice. "To Sarah's Table," he said, "and to Robert, whose generosity will change lives." Others lifted their glasses, cheering softly. Robert felt tears at the corners of his eyes. He mouthed the words, "Thank you" to Sarah's teachers and volunteers. After the applause died down, guests began to discuss plans. Ms. Malik described routes for mobile vans. The teachers outlined menus for school lunches. The doctor spoke about adding vitamins and checkups. Robert listened, learned, and promised funding. He felt more alive than he had in years. When dinner ended, Robert walked some guests to the door. One by one, they thanked him. "You have done more tonight than most people do in a lifetime," Ms. Patel said, hugging him. He smiled and said, "I have you all to thank. Your kindness and hard work made this possible." Late that night, Robert stayed in his study, reviewing the day's notes. He sent emails to his foundation team, instructing them to begin transfers. He assigned team leaders and set timelines. He felt a peaceful energy guiding him. He thought of Sarah's request that no child go hungry, and realized this work would continue long after he was gone. The next morning, he called his doctor and nurse, asking them to let him go outside for some fresh air. He walked to the balcony, feeling the cool breeze. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply. He thought of the faces he had met. Sarah's bright smile, the principal's gratitude, the volunteers' determination. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He returned inside and found Maria waiting with breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said softly. He nodded and said, "Good morning, Maria. How is Sarah today?" Maria replied, "She is at school, sir. She asked if she could help with Sarah's Table one day." Robert chuckled softly. "I'm sure she can. She's already helped me more than I could ever explain." That afternoon, Robert visited the community kitchen that Ms. Malik ran. Inside a modest building, volunteers prepared meals for families. Lines formed outside as people waited politely. Robert walked in, carrying bags of rice and lentils. The volunteers greeted him with surprised smiles. "Robert," Ms. Malik said, "you shouldn't have." He patted her arm. "Ow. See this in action?" he said simply. He helped scoop rice onto plates, added stew, and handed meals to children. A boy of about 6 looked up and smiled shyly. Robert knelt down and said, "Enjoy your meal." The boy nodded and found a seat. With his sister, Robert felt tears in his eyes. He knew that this small act, done hundreds of times each day, would feed hungry hearts and grow hope. After a few hours, Rabba left the kitchen and walked through the neighborhood. Children played in dusty streets, some riding bikes, others kicking a ball. Mothers smiled and waved at him. He walked to a small park where a few families sat on benches. He sat beside a mother and asked how things were. She said they were better now, thanks to the meals and the school uniforms. She said her son, Kareem, was learning to read because he was not hungry and could focus at school. Robert listened, his heart soaring. He thought of how Sarah's simple request had become a movement. He thought of how one child's courage and honesty had given him purpose. He realized that no amount of money could match the value of a child's trust. When he returned home, he found a letter waiting. It was from Sarah's mother, Mrs. Khan. She wrote, "Thank you for everything you are doing. Sarah is happier than I have ever seen her. You have changed our lives." Robert framed the letter and placed it on his desk. He looked at it and whispered, "Thank you, Sarah." That evening, Robert climbed into bed with a sense of calm. His body felt weaker, but his spirit was strong. He closed his eyes and pictured the future. Children eating warm meals, laughing with friends, learning in bright classrooms. He imagined Sarah growing up, perhaps helping others just as he had helped her. He drifted into sleep with a peaceful smile. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's table grew beyond the city. Fundraising events brought more supporters. News articles praised the initiative, yet Robert remained humble. He moved quietly among the kitchens and schools, listening to people, learning their needs, and offering his help. He never forgot that. It started with a little girl who taught him that love and kindness could heal loneliness and give life meaning. As Robert's illness progressed, he spent more time at home, but he kept working. He held meetings from his study and wrote letters to donors. He recorded video messages for future volunteers. He made sure that the foundation would continue after his passing. He asked Maria to organize a celebration each year on the date Sarah first walked into his life, so everyone would remember how a small act of kindness could change the world. On a clear morning a few months later, Robert felt his strength fading. Maria helped him to the balcony one last time. He stood and looked out over the city. In the distance he saw a mobile food van with the words "Sarah's Table" painted on its side, parked next to a school. A group of children lined up too. Receive meals, their faces bright. He felt tears of joy and relief. He whispered, "We did it, Sarah." He closed his eyes and remembered the day they first met, the day she taught him to care. He took a final breath, content in the knowledge that his life had found true purpose. He smiled, and then he was gone. In the months after his death, Sarah's Table continued to grow. Volunteers carried on his vision. Children's laughter filled kitchens and classrooms. And every year, on the anniversary of their meeting, a small celebration honored the bond between a lonely billionaire and a hungry little girl whose replies shocked them all and whose wisdom changed the world.